My parents missed my wedding because of my sister's divorce. 5 years later, they begged to come to my house. It's been over 5 years, but I still remember the day of my wedding like a vivid scar etched into my memory. It should have been the happiest day of my life. I had the woman I loved by my side, a modest but beautiful venue, close friends surrounding us, but 2 seats in the front row remained empty. Reserved. Marked with names. My parents never came. They didn't miss it because of traffic, or illness, or bad weather. They missed it because my sister was going through a divorce. Her name is Eva. Younger than me by 3 years, always dramatic, always the center of attention. When she got married a year before me, it was an extravagant affair with hundreds of guests, a designer dress, a 3-tiered cake that probably cost more than my car. My parents beamed with pride that day, like they'd just handed over a crown. But the marriage didn't last. Barely 10 months in, Eva came to my parents' house crying, mascara running down her cheeks, holding a suitcase in one hand and her shattered sense of self in the other. She said, "I can't do it anymore. I'm done with Adam." Just like that. My parents sprang into action like her generals in a war they hadn't prepared for. Every waking moment became about supporting Eva. Counseling sessions, legal consultations, staying up all night with tea and tissues and hushed conversations. I get it, divorce is hard. Watching your child go through it is even harder. But what hurt most was how they stopped acknowledging anything that wasn't about her. I had sent out wedding invitations 2 months prior. I reminded them weekly. I had told them how much it meant to me. My fiancé and I had planned everything with such care, a quiet garden ceremony followed by a small dinner. Nothing over the top. But every time I brought it up, my mother would say, "Sweetheart, we're just so overwhelmed with everything going on right now. Can't we talk about this next week?" Next week became next month, and eventually, I stopped asking. 3 days before the wedding, I called them to confirm. My mom's voice on the phone was cold and distant. "We're not sure we can make it," she said. I didn't answer at first. "But, it's my wedding," I finally said. "I know, honey. But your sister's mediation is that same weekend. You know how delicate she is right now." I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I just hung up and stared at my reflection in the mirror, wondering when I stopped being someone worth showing up for. On the day itself, I walked down the aisle with a pit in my stomach. Everyone kept asking, "Where are your parents?" and I had to smile and say, "Something came up." My fiancé, no, my wife now, squeezed my hand, her eyes full of understanding and sadness she didn't want me to see. But I felt it. The reception was beautiful. People laughed, danced, drank. Toasts were made. But every time I looked at the empty seats where my parents should have been, it felt like someone was knocking the wind out of me again and again. It's strange how absence can be louder than presence. That night, I tore up their name cards and threw them into the fireplace in our hotel room. I watched the edges curl and blacken, trying to convince myself I was burning away the hurt. We moved on. My wife and I built a home together, small but full of light. She painted the living room in shades of cream and yellow, always saying how it made the space feel warm and alive. I went to work every day, came home to the smell of dinner and quiet laughter. For a long time, I didn't speak to my parents. They didn't reach out either, not at first. When they finally did, it was through short, awkward texts. "How are you? Hope everything's going okay. We're thinking of you." They never mentioned the wedding. Never apologized. Never said, "We should have been there." Eva, on the other hand, came back stronger than ever. A few months after her divorce was finalized, she got back together with an old flame from college. A year later, another wedding. My parents, of course, were there in matching navy outfits, front and center in every photo, grinning like the past never happened. I wasn't invited. And honestly, I didn't expect to be. The years passed slowly. Birthdays came and went. Holidays were split awkwardly. I get calls from my mother asking if we could all just meet halfway, as though grief and betrayal could be measured in miles and compromise. My wife asked me once, "Do you miss them?" and I said, without hesitation, yes. But not the version they became. And then came the message. Just a few weeks ago. It was a voicemail. My father's voice, older than I remembered, strained and unsure. "Hey, it's your dad. Your mom and we were wondering if we could come by. Just to talk. We miss you, son." I played it 3 times before letting my wife hear it. She didn't say much. Just nodded and said, "It's your call." Now I sit here, in the living room she painted, looking out the window at the long driveway leading to our door. Wondering what I'll say if they actually show up. wondering if 5 years is too long for forgiveness to grow roots. I didn't call them back right away. The message sat on my phone for days like a bruise I kept touching to see if it still hurt. I'd listen to it when my wife was out, playing it low with the volume turned down, just to hear the way my father's voice cracked near the end. I couldn't tell if it was regret or just age catching up to him. On the 6th day, I deleted it. But that didn't stop the next message from coming. This time it was my mom. The words were more carefully chosen, like she'd written them down and read them off a piece of paper. I know we don't deserve your forgiveness. I know what we did or didn't do is something you may never forget. But your father and I, we're not getting any younger. We don't want to leave this life without seeing you again. We miss you, and we love you. Please, just let us come by. One time. One time. It was strange, the way she said that, like they were preparing for a funeral and wanted one last glance before the lid closed. The worst part was that a part of me wanted to say yes. Despite everything, I wanted to believe they meant it. That maybe, just maybe, 5 years had taught them something. But I didn't trust myself to respond. Not yet. Instead, I spent the next week turning over memories like stones in a garden. Some were smooth and warm, Sunday mornings when my dad and I would go fishing, the way my mom used to bake cinnamon rolls when I was sick. Others were sharp and ugly, the way they talked over me during wedding planning, the way my mom kept saying, "Your sister needs us more." That phrase, "needs us more," had become the motto of my resentment. It followed me through the years like a whisper in a library. Quiet, but impossible to ignore. And yet, one afternoon, I found myself in the attic, pulling down a box of old photo albums. I told myself I was looking for something else, but we both know that wasn't true. The album was thick, leather-bound, with our family name embossed in gold. Inside were pages of smiling faces, sunlit days at the beach, Christmas mornings with wrapping paper everywhere. There were pictures of Eva and me as kids, muddy and wild in our backyard. My mom holding both of us, laughing with her head thrown back. My dad, younger and broader, giving me a piggyback ride while Eva clung to his leg. None of those people existed anymore. I closed the album and sat on the floor, the dust clinging to my jeans, and thought about the last time I had spoken to either of them in person. It was the week before the wedding. I was at their house, trying to be calm. "I understand Eva's going through something," I'd said. "But I only plan to get married once." My mother had been quiet, folding laundry like she couldn't bear to look at me. My father had sighed, like this whole conversation was a burden he didn't want. "You'll have your day," he said. "But she needs us now." I remember how small I felt. Like a guest in my own life. Now, 5 years later, they were asking to walk back through a door they'd closed themselves. And I couldn't decide if I should open it, or keep it shut for good. That night, I brought it up to my wife again. We were sitting on the couch, drinking tea, the TV playing quietly in the background. I told her about the second voicemail. She didn't say anything at first. Then she reached over and took my hand. "What are you afraid of?" she asked. I wanted to say I wasn't afraid. But that would have been a lie. I was afraid of letting them in and getting hurt again. Of opening myself up only to be reminded that, in their eyes, I came second. Always had. "I don't know if I can forgive them," I said. She looked at me, soft and steady. "You don't have to forgive them. But you can still decide what kind of man you want to be." That line stuck with me. I spent the next day thinking about what kind of man I wanted to be. Eventually, I texted them. Just one sentence. "You can come by this Saturday at 3. No smiley face. No signature. Just that. I didn't tell them they were forgiven. I didn't promise anything. I only offered the smallest opening. On Saturday, the sky was overcast. Not stormy, but dim, like the weather itself wasn't sure how to feel about what was about to happen. My wife had gone out to give us space. She didn't need to say it, she just knew. I vacuumed the living room, wiped the counters twice, and adjusted the same cushion on the couch 4 times before giving up and sitting in silence. At 2:58, I heard tires on the gravel. At 3:01, the doorbell rang. I didn't move at first. Just sat there, staring at the door like it might open itself. Then I stood up and walked over, slowly. When I opened the door, there they were. Older, thinner, the lines in their faces deeper. My father had a cane now. My mother's hair had gone fully gray. For a second, none of us spoke. Then she stepped forward, her voice barely above a whisper. "Hi. Hi." It was such a simple word, but it landed with the weight of 5 years behind it. They stood there, awkward and unsure, like strangers at the wrong address. My mother clutched her handbag with both hands, her fingers pale and tight. My father looked older than I remembered, smaller, somehow like time had hollowed out parts of him. His eyes searched my face, trying to read whether I'd let them cross the threshold. I stepped aside without saying a word. They walked in slowly, like they were afraid of breaking something. My mother looked around at the living room, the photos on the wall, the small plants on the windowsill, the cozy throws my wife insisted on draping over every chair. "You've made it beautiful," she said. I gave a slight nod and motioned to the couch. They sat side by side, stiff and nervous. I took the chair across from them. Silence followed, dense and suffocating. I waited. They were the ones who wanted this. I wasn't going to make it easy. My father cleared his throat. "We didn't know how to start," he said. "We've gone over this conversation in our heads 100 times, but none of it seems enough." My mother nodded, eyes brimming with tears she was trying to blink away. "We were wrong," she said. "We know that." I didn't flinch. Didn't look away. "You didn't just miss my wedding," I said. My voice was even, but firm. "You made a choice. Over and over. Every time I called, every time I reminded you, you chose her." "I know," my mom said. "And we've regretted it every day." My father leaned forward, cane between his knees. "Your mother and I, we thought we were doing what was right at the time. Eva was falling apart, and we panicked. We were trying to hold her together. But we should have made space for you too. We should have been there. But you weren't." "No," he said, quietly. "We weren't." Another silence fell. This one felt different, not like a wall, but like an opening. "I think part of me believed," I said, "that if I didn't hear you say it out loud, maybe it wouldn't hurt as much. But it did. It still does." "I don't expect forgiveness," my mom whispered. We missed so much. And we didn't know how to come back from it." I looked at them, really looked. These were not the same people who had stood at Eva's second wedding beaming with pride while pretending my own never happened. These were people worn down by time and guilt, sitting in my home with their hearts in their hands. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want them to beg. I just wanted the truth, and for once, they were giving it to me. "I won't pretend like everything's okay," I said. "It's not. But you showed up today. That's more than you've done in 5 years." My mother reached out instinctively, but stopped halfway, unsure if she had the right. "I don't know how to fix this," she said. "But I want to try. If you'll let us." There was a long pause. My throat felt tight, my chest heavier than before. I remembered how it felt to dance at my wedding and look at those 2 empty chairs. That emptiness had stayed with me, but now it had faces. Voices. Regret. I looked at my father. "You missed something you can never get back," I said. "But I haven't built a life where everything stops there. If you want to be part of it now, you'll have to earn your place in it." He nodded slowly, his eyes glassy. "I understand." And for the first time since they arrived, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "Then let's start here," I said. "No pretending. No rewriting history. Just, here." My mother wiped her eyes and smiled weakly. "Here is more than we hoped for." They stayed for 2 hours. We didn't talk about Eva. We didn't talk about the wedding again. We talked about my job, about the neighborhood, about the food I liked to cook. My father asked about my wife, my mother asked to see pictures. They listened, really listened, in a way I hadn't felt from them in years. As they were leaving, my mom paused at the doorway. "Thank you," she said, barely audible. I didn't reply. Just watched as they walked down the drive and got into their car. It pulled away slowly, the taillights blinking red at the stop sign before disappearing around the corner. I closed the door and leaned against it, my heart a tangled mix of sorrow, relief, and uncertainty. That night, I told my wife everything. She listened, nodded, then held me without saying a word. The door was open now. But I wasn't sure yet if I wanted them to keep walking through it. The next few weeks were quiet, like the air after a storm. There was no flood of messages, no sudden invitations to family dinners, no apologies on repeat. Just a single text from my father 2 days after they visited. "Thank you for seeing us. We'll wait for your lead." It was, surprisingly, exactly what I needed to hear. I didn't reply right away. I wanted to sit with what had happened, not rush to rebuild something just because we'd managed a civil conversation. Rebuilding trust wasn't a weekend project. It wasn't even a season's worth of effort. It was years, brick by careful brick. But I also knew the first brick had already been placed. The second came a week later. I was in the backyard trimming the hedges when I heard my wife calling me from the kitchen. "Your mom dropped something off," she said, holding a brown paper bag with my name written on it in shaky handwriting. Inside were containers of food, my favorite homemade dishes from childhood. Stuffed peppers. Apple cinnamon rolls. A small handwritten note tucked into the side read, "I remembered you liked these. I hope they still taste the same." They did. Almost too much. It was like biting into a memory. That night, I stared at the empty container for a long time before texting her back. "They were good. Thanks." She replied within minutes. "Glad you liked them. We'd love to cook for you both sometime." No pressure. I didn't say yes. But I didn't say no either. Little by little, they became a soft background hum in our lives. Not loud, not imposing, just present. They sent a card for our anniversary. A simple note, no dramatic declarations, just a line that said, "Thinking of you both today." That one hit differently. My wife and I talked about them more openly after that. She'd always been measured in how she felt angry on my behalf, but not bitter. She saw how complicated it was for me and never tried to push a resolution before I was ready. One evening, as we were folding laundry, she said, "Do you think you'll ever invite them to dinner?" I paused mid-fold. "Maybe," I said. "But not because they asked. Because I want to." And I did, eventually. 2 months after their visit, I called my mom and asked if they wanted to come over for a casual dinner. No big occasion. Just a Tuesday. She said yes so quickly I heard her voice catch. I kept the menu simple: grilled chicken, roasted vegetables, and the lemon tarts my wife had perfected over the years. The house was clean, the table set, and I felt okay. Not nervous. Not angry. Just open, in a way I hadn't been for a long time. When they arrived, they didn't bring anything fancy. Just a small bouquet of flowers and a quiet energy that didn't try to fill every silence with apology. We ate, we talked, we laughed a little. At one point, my dad even helped me fix the loose kitchen cabinet, something I'd been meaning to get to for months. It was nice. Uneasy, at moments, sure. But nice. At the end of the night, as they were putting on their coats, my mother turned to me with this hesitant look. "Would you ever tell us about the wedding? What it was like?" I wasn't expecting the question. But I didn't shut it down. Instead, I led them to the living room and pulled out the photo album. The one we hadn't looked at in years. I sat between them and flipped through the pages, narrating the moments like a tour guide in my own history. This was when we did the first look. She cried. I didn't expect that. "This is the dance with her father," he surprised us with a song. "These are the toasts." That's my best friend nearly falling off the chair. They listened. They laughed. My mom wiped tears more than once. At the last page, I closed the album and sat back. I could feel their eyes on me, but I didn't look up right away. When I finally did, my father said quietly, "We missed something beautiful." "Yes," I said, "you did." There was no fixing that. No way to recreate the moment. But saying it out loud to them made it less sharp somehow. Before they left, my mom turned to me at the door. "I know we'll never deserve a second chance at that day," she said, "but if there's a way we can show up for the days ahead, we'll be there." I nodded. No promises. Just that. And that was enough. That night, after they left, I stood in the quiet living room, the photo album still on the table. My wife came up behind me, wrapped her arms around my waist, and rested her chin on my shoulder. "You did it," she said. "I think we're doing it," I replied. And for the first time in 5 years, I felt like the empty chairs in my memory didn't have as much power anymore. They were still there. But so was I. So were we. A year passed. One quiet, steady, sometimes awkward but surprisingly healing year. We didn't become the kind of family that called each other every day or took spontaneous trips together. But we saw each other. Shared meals. Swapped stories. Spoke honestly. That, in its own way, felt more meaningful than anything we'd faked in the past. There were moments, small but sharp, that reminded me healing isn't linear. Like the time my mother called to ask if we wanted to do a holiday dinner together, and I froze, instantly transported back to my first Christmas as a married man. The one they hadn't acknowledged. I almost said no out of habit, out of defense. But then I remembered how far we'd come. So I said yes. We hosted. They brought wine. My father carved the turkey like he used to. My mom stood in the kitchen and asked for recipes, not to judge, but to learn. My wife, ever the quiet observer, leaned over at one point and whispered, "This feels normal." And it did. Not perfect. Not picture book polished. But real. Even Eva softened. She called one day out of the blue. I hadn't spoken to her in over 2 years. Her voice was tentative, uncertain. "I heard Mom and Dad have been coming around again." "Yeah," I said. "You okay with that?" "I am," I said. Took a while. There was a pause, then she asked, "Would you ever want to talk?" I wasn't ready that day. But I wasn't angry anymore either. "Maybe," I said. "Not yet. But maybe." That maybe meant more than anything we'd said before. Because here's the thing about wounds, they don't always close with a dramatic stitch or a bold declaration of forgiveness. Sometimes they just stop bleeding. Quietly. On their own. The real moment of change didn't come in a grand conversation or a tearful reunion. It came one spring afternoon when I saw my father walking down the path toward our house, slow but steady, holding a toolbox. Our kitchen sink had started leaking, and I had casually mentioned it to him the week before. I didn't ask for help. But he showed up anyway. "Thought I'd take a look at that pipe," he said, shrugging, like it was no big deal. I let him in. Sat on the floor beside him as he worked. Handed him tools like I used to when I was 10. And at one point, he looked up from under the sink and said, "You know, I really regret that day." "I know," I said. "I think about it every time I look at your mom. Every time she talks about that empty chair." I didn't respond. Just kept passing him tools. "But I also think," he continued, "that maybe we were supposed to lose something to learn how to be better. Not just parents. People. And maybe that was true. Maybe we all had to break a little before we figured out how to hold each other the right way." When he finished fixing the leak, we sat at the kitchen table and had coffee. My wife joined us, smiling as if she knew something I didn't. My mom showed up an hour later with dessert. They didn't overstay. They didn't bring up the past. They just stayed a while. Laughed. Lingered. Then left with hugs that didn't feel obligatory. After they left, I stood by the door for a long time. Watching the driveway. The spring breeze carried the scent of new flowers and cut grass. My wife wrapped her arms around me, and I leaned into her warmth. "You think we're okay?" she asked. I nodded slowly. "Yeah," I said. "I think we finally are." There are still moments when the past taps me on the shoulder. Memories don't vanish. But they've stopped hurting the way they used to. And more importantly, they've made space for new ones. We're not the same family we were before that wedding. We never will be. But we're something else now. Real. Flawed. Trying. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough. Thank you for watching the video. Like it if you watched the video to the end and don't forget to subscribe. Have a nice day.